Welcome to the second episode of Deep Chats. My name is Ian Beabout, and I am joined by my co-host, Mike Lieto. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Say hello to Mike. Hello, everyone. Okay.
Everyone, hello, welcome.
Everyone, hello. Okay. So today, we are talking about another new music release, a new record. This one isn't quite as new as our first review, which was Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum's Of the Last Human Being record, released this year, 2024. Instead, we are going back to the olden times. We're going way back to the year 2023, November. Jack of the Clock with the Warm Dark Circus. This is the latest, possibly the greatest, but definitely the latest from Damon Waitkes and his band of merry men and women. Okay, so real quick, we'll kind of talk about, the artwork is great.
This one has amazing artwork.
This one does have great artwork.
Yeah, so this is a painting by Albrecht Dürer, who was a German Renaissance painter. But also throughout the album liner notes, or the lyrics sheet, it has AI generated images based loosely on rhinoceroses and on Dürer's art as well. You can kind of see some of that here. It's very cool.
It is, yeah. And I thought I'd mention that the gentleman who did this artwork, this layout design, is Chester Hawkins. And Chester has done a lot of the Soft Machine albums that I've worked on, so I'm very familiar with his work. He's one of Cuneiform's stalwart collaborators. He's on a lot of their releases. But yeah, it's good because Jack of the Clock have always had great music, but I think they've really stepped up the imagery, the album covers in the last 2 or 3 albums. Like they didn't always have, like, oftentimes their album covers, would have just kind of like a photo of something on it. But aside from like Night Loops, which had a fantastic cover art, I think, the other ones could be a little bit nondescript. So I like that they are collaborating with Chester Hawkins on this and Leaving California, because I think that the visual, the design standpoint has been stepped up for them on the last couple of releases. Let's introduce the Warm Dark Circus. So this is the familiar lineup. Jack of the Clock has maintained a fairly stable lineup over the past 10 or so years, of Damon Waitkes, vocals, guitar, hammer, dulcimers, piano, flutes, etc. Emily Packard, violin, viola, Jason Hoops, bass, Jordan Glenn, drums, accordion, synth. And on the last 2 records, they've been joined by Thea Kelly, who is kind of the Carla Kihlstedt to Damon's Nils. Like, she's kind of the counterpoint. And honestly, much like Kate McLaughlin, who is the vocalist on a lot of the other stuff, she's the perfect foil to Damon because their voices are so similar. But she's able to go up in those, those higher melodies that maybe he doesn't as often.
They blend really well.
And
also.
they blend really well.
Holy moly. The singing on this album is something else. It's really amazing.
It's some of, I even think I commented that this album is some of Damon's best vocal performances. Like, he really goes all out on a lot of this.
Yeah, I think it's his best singing, and some of his best writing also. Like,
definitely.
In my opinion, Damon Waitkes is one of the best composers that we have alive. He is such an amazing composer and arranger, and it's all over this album.
Yeah.
And especially in the vocal department, like the melodies are just so inventive and so, they always keep you guessing, but they're kind of catchy in a weird way. In the way that he writes that material for this band is just something special. It really is. It's very complex, but also very, palatable and accessible. And it's a rare strength, I think, to have as a composer, to incorporate both.
It's almost Andy Partridge-esque.
Yeah, that might be why I like it so damn much. It's like Andy Partridge or it's like Cardiacs in a way. They don't sound like
Yeah.
that, like in the same like tonal palette, but it's really complex music. It's sophisticated music
Yeah,
with
and
accessibility.
there's lots of layers to it. There's lots
Yeah,
to kind of peel back and discover.
yeah,
But,
it's deep.
so they're joined by a number of guest musicians, including Victor Reynolds, guitars, recorders, harmonica, vocals, Carl Evangelista, electric guitar, Ben Spies, who appears on one track playing microtonal guitars, Miles Boyson, who also produced and mastered the record, plays pedal steel, Art Elliott plays piano, Kate McLaughlin returns on bassoon, which is a welcome return.
Yes.
Although she's not a full-time member of the band here, she's listed as a guest musician. Ivor Holloway on saxophones, and I believe Ivor has been on Damon's project since 2010, 2009.
Wow.
I see his name all over, like as far back as I think How Are We Doing and Who Will Tell Us, which is kind of like, I think it's like their second record.
That's their second album, yeah.
Second album. John Russell, clarinets, Keith Waters, baritone saxophone, Josh Packard, cello. So I thought, as I kind of written this down as like, we're talking big picture. Jack of the Clock could be easily broken down into three different kinds of compositions. Now, this is just my observation. You may disagree, but the first one is the heroic long pieces. The second is the singer-songwriter quirky pop songs. And then the third are the atmospheric interludes. Now, sometimes they may have one, two, or all three of these things within the same composition.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like most of their material can be kind of broken down into these three categories. Would you agree with that?
I think I would. There are, I think, a couple of tunes that kind of break the mold, but for the most part, I would agree with you, especially on the last few records. Like the compositions really do split. Like you really see it on Repetitions and on this one, both the Repetitions albums, because you get, little interludes, and then there's like short little songs, and then there's the big epics.
Yeah.
But they're not always in that order. But you can see the framework based on the time of the tunes alone.
Sure,
well, I agree with you. Yeah, it's definitely there. But it doesn't mean it's anywhere near formulaic. This music is not formulaic by any stretch.
No. And I think that Jack of the Clock's music is at its most surprising when it dares to be formulaic. And I'm talking about like a song like, I mean, it's not on this record, but a song like Leaving California on the previous record. I was listening to that last night and I thought, I would hate to do it, but if he cut out all those little excursions that make it the kind of piece it is, it's kind of just a bluegrassy, simple song. Like, I feel like Damon could have a career writing that kind of stuff if he wanted to. But he kind of chooses to let his imagination run wild. And I think that to our benefit, I think, and his benefit,
I agree.
Too,
absolutely.
He chooses to let his imagination run wild, and I'm so grateful that he does. So, okay, with that in mind, we're going to kind of go track by track, although we may skip around or talk about some songs more than others, because some songs are quite long and involved.
Yes.
And there's lots to say, but the first thing that I noticed about this first track, The Ladder Slipped, is here you have an album that this could really only, break through the concrete, like a blade of grass in the world of progressive music.
Yeah.
However, there's nothing here that's explicitly proggy.
No, it's, I think like this band is real special because they really do have their own sound and they're really their own way of making music. Like it is not, I would not call this music like progressive rock. I would call it its own thing. There's no genre here. It's just like pure music making.
And there's no really way to be able to trace, oh, this is their early material, this is their mid period, this is their latest material, because sort of in a Frank Zappian kind of way, it's all part of one big note because of the way that Damon works. And, I guess that I'm coming to this with a bit of an unfair advantage because I've shared a few emails and texts and phone calls, and we've interviewed him before.
Yes.
He's like a personal friend. So I do have a different perspective on this, but he's told me that he'll do sessions, 10 years ago that he won't revive and add to until, now. Like he'll have stuff that sits around in the bank for years and years and years and years, and he'll pick it out and put it together and make it new. And what you end up with is a body of work that is so amazingly consistent. It doesn't feel like one album is a progression of the next. It more feels like they're all interconnecting. They're all having a conversation with one another. And I really love that about his work. Like, I think that's one thing that makes them unlike anything else around ever.
Yeah, I really like the way you said they have a conversation with each other, like the albums, because they told it, like, that's a really nice way to put it, because they kind of do. Like, they don't sit, the chronology doesn't necessarily matter because they all kind of sit in the same room, and you can interchange one on the other, and they're, you can't really tell when they came out. Like, it all has the same kind of musical language.
It's sort of like
its own thing.
Yeah, it's like bringing back the Frank Zappa reference. Like, at one point he had said that he could have re-edited the first handful of Mothers of Invention albums in any particular configuration anyway, and still had released them. He could still release them in any edit. And I feel like there's a quality of that to this work as well. That, the presentation, it matters, but it doesn't matter in the same way that it does to other bands. So with that in mind, some of this material is over 15 years old. Some of it goes all the way back to Jack of the Clock's early songs. So anyway, the ladder slipped. Here you open up, and I made a comment that it's like the Supertramp album, Crime of the Century, because you just have this lone harmonica in the background before some kind of banjo and dulcimer.
I noted all of those things. Like, I loved how the harmonica and banjo open up the tune. It's so cool.
And we're like, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's like immediately we are so far away from what I would expect from something to come out of the progressive rock scene.
Yeah, you almost never hear banjo, right?
yeah, and his vocals almost have like a bluegrassy tone to them.
It's very Americana.
And this, he's got this storytelling about, someone who's been hurt, and I kind of gleaned from the lyrics that they had been prescribed some heavy opium or something, and
some sort of painkillers.
Kind of thrown back in the world with debt. And, it feels like just such an American story, such a relatable story, unfortunately. But it has this like atmospheric quality to it that brings back the Night Loops album, or the Night Loops album. Is almost what this track reminds me of. And then about 3/4 of the way through, the Mellotron kicks in, and suddenly it's like, oh, something I can grab onto that is somewhat progressive, but it's used in a way that's so unexpected. Like, it's the last thing you expect when it comes in. To have this lush Genesis style orchestration come in from the Mellotron, and then the whole thing just kind of pulls apart to the conclusion. Did you notice that?
I did. The ending, I thought was, I made a note about the ending too. The ending is beautiful to this too. Like, the way everything kind of separates.
Yeah.
It's so great. I also think this song, especially, like, this whole album is like, the lyrics are amazing, but especially this tune, like, it really showcases Damon as a storyteller. Like, a lot of Jack of the Clock tunes are like that. Like they have a story to tell. like one of my favorites is like Denny Takes One for the Team.
Yeah, it's one of my personal favorites as well.
Repetitions One album. It's this kind of a similar. It's not in this like a similar story, but it has the same kind of like storytelling quality because you got to get lost in the story that's really relatable to a lot of us Americans who have to pay for a lot of health care.
Right. Yeah. And
some accident happens and you're crushed under the debt forever. It's very sad, but it's very relatable, and you get lost in the story because of how well the lyrics are written and how well the music is executed.
Yeah, the human center.
Yeah.
To Damon's words and the characters and the backdrop of the Americana. Like I agree. Like 22 or Denny Takes One for the Team. That's a very good reference.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a good time as any to mention that we've seen Jack of the Clock. And I guess I could throw up a picture now of of the time that we saw them. We saw them live and heard a lot of that material that became Repetitions 1 and 2. But anyway, I do have that comment here. I love that Lone Gilmore style solo at around 5 minutes or so. The ending seems to deconstruct itself.
Yeah, it does. It's so great. And it segues into like probably the biggest slice of Americana on the album, which is Division Blues. It's so swampy. I love it.
Oh yeah, that's a good word for it.
Yeah, it has like the Barry sax complements it so great. It's really like swampy. Like it feels like this tune is like it puts you in the murky ground. It's so cool, and it has that like microtonal guitar stuff with Ben Spees.
Yes,
that's
Mercury
awesome.
Trees, Ben Spees. Yeah. And when you say swampy, it even kind of takes me back to a song on the How Are We Doing and Who Will Tell Us record called Back to the Swamp.
Yep, I thought that too.
Which has that grittiness to it. But you hear, I mean, this is more messed up.
It is, for sure.
Lack of a better word.
It's more demented. It has like a Captain Beefheart quality, I think.
Yeah, and like I say the violin, I said in my notes, the violin parts are distorted and mistreated. Because there's some kind of transformative synthesized effect going on. I don't know if it's like an AI synth or something, but they're being distorted and mutilated, like the orcs, into something that they aren't. And I really enjoy this piece. Like there's I think when I first heard this album, this was actually my favorite on the album. So again, it's sort of like the track Save It on SGM. Like you could hand this song to somebody and probably get them into this album.
For sure.
And it's short. It's succinct, it says its thing and it's gone. And it gives you a really good idea of what makes this record special. And again, it's like you said, it's that warped sense of Americana and storytelling.
Absolutely.
So we move on to Stuck Inside Elvis, which I made the comment that the main melody has an Uncle Meat quality to it.
Yeah, that's a really good pickup. I think it does. my notes are gushing about this song. I love this song. And like every other word is like gorgeous, beautiful, fun. Like there's like a bassoon and sax call and response opening. It's so great. The lyrics are fantastic again. It's just one of their most catchiest songs that's on the record and probably in their whole catalog, with the ending with the Warm Dark Circus of her face. That's very catchy. It'll stick right in your brain.
Oh yeah. Because it's another one that it seems to be almost impressionistic at first, with like a lot of sounds and a lot of dissonance, and then it all just kind of becomes clear on that line, the Warm Dark Circus of her face.
Yeah,
and it has that
gorgeous, like rings true,
Yeah, very ecstasy, or like almost like the Smashing Pumpkins song Cupid de Lock. Like I could hear a little bit of that. And I think I even wrote down King Gizzard. Like it reminds me some of their like quirky, fluty stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But it's so, like you say, it's just so uniquely Jack of the Clock.
It is uniquely Jack of the Clock. I also made a note that there's like this tune has some amazing counter melodies in the bass and the piano. The counter melody against the vocals is crazy. Like I remember last time I listened to this a couple days ago, I was just like, what is this? Like listen to it, like it's so cool. It's so cool. That also I should mention before I forget, one of my favorite things about this band is the rhythm section.
Oh yes.
Yeah, Jason Hoops on the bass and Jordan Glenn on drums. Those guys are amazing musicians. They're like, so I think they're one of the best rhythm sections working around. Like they not only play really tastefully, but also like always serve the songs. And that's like the best thing you can do as a rhythm section. It is. Oh, yes. It's amazing. They always do that. They impress me on every song that they play on.
Jubilation comes to mind because there's a lot of really rapid bass and tom stuff going on, and that's a song that almost feels similar to this, like Stuck Inside Elvis. Like it has that similar, like, it's almost like the opposite of anxiety. It's like anticipation, excitement,
absolutely.
Happiness.
It's a very like joyful music, both of those songs.
Yeah. And that's not always something that you get not only with Jack of the Clock's music, but kind of like the avant progressive world in general. They're oftentimes it's very dour and serious, but it's kind of these bands that also know when to go for the joyousness too. Like that also really draws me in as well. So, this is one of the strongest songs on the album. We have 3 really strong songs, right off the bat. Now, this next song, Sage's song, you had a lot to say about this in your notes, but I kind of said that it was a bit like Steve Hackett. Maybe like the guitar kind of was reminiscent of me to Steve Hackett, Genesis.
I can see that. Yeah, it's just like it's a short little ditty. Yeah, like, I think the guitar's work is beautiful. It's very much, actually, I think you're right in saying it could be like Steve Hackett, like classical guitar Steve Hackett.
Yeah.
Like more of like the acoustic balladry. It reminds me of that song, the opening song of Repetitions 1, just because of how short it is.
Sure.
It's almost like a little like lullaby.
That's actually, I think I wrote that down too. Short and sweet. I like how lullaby like this is compared to what came. I said the same thing. Yeah. It was lullaby like, and you always have these short interludes on these Jack of the Clock albums, and this album actually ends with something that's kind of really sparse and not very complicated. It's just kind of, like there is a palate cleanser. And I was thinking about that today and thinking about Damon Wachus's process. And, you get the sense that Damon could have rejected 3 or 5 amazing pieces for this album and saved them in exchange for these little palate cleansers, because he knew that they served the overall flow of the record better. Yeah. And had he put another amazing 8-minute song, like that might take something away from these other long pieces. So I like that he's willing to do that. He's willing to hold back things and use them where appropriate.
Yeah, you're so right. And, again, this is another album that's really well sequenced. And like, it's because he's doing that. It's like, oh, these other things are, they're needed here rather than like an album of 30-minute songs. This is, diversity.
Yes. It's sort of like one time I read that Roger Waters was just impossible to work with because he would gladly delete some beautiful piece of music for static, because the static fit the tone that he was going for more than, that fit the overall aesthetic and the storytelling. So that kind of self-edit, that's a discipline. And,
for sure.
It's clearly one that is at the core of the Jack of the Clock process. So we move on to what you say is your favorite piece on the record. And it certainly is. There's a lot here to dig into.
Yeah, it's rather dense. It's the first epic in a row. It's 13 minutes and change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite long.
Yeah, it's Durer's Rhinoceros.
And I commented once again that this opens in kind of Kate Bush mode. It's like kind of like in Dream of Sheep.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
and
Yeah.
with delicate string parts. And I mentioned that one strength of this album, and this is, indicative of Dura's Rhino, but it's also, kind of could be just used to describe the whole record. But each piece, it's not like a hard transition. Each piece just kind of melds one into the other. And I mean, I should say passage. Each passage within the pieces, they meld one right into the other like a dream. Like suddenly you're in this part of the dream, but now it melts and you're into another part of the dream. And it feels almost like psychedelic in the way that things just kind of melt one right into the other and flow so organically.
Yeah, it's really cohesive in that way, I think. Like I think you said flow. I think this piece flows of the epic pieces. This one flows the best to my ears. Like all
Yeah.
the little parts, like I think it's just a really great flow of different sections. There's one of my favorite sections is there's a killer cello solo towards the end of this piece with an amazing bass line, kind of like, holding it up. There's also, and I quote, there's a, maybe it's not a specific thing, but there's like the stuff from the 3-minute mark to the 6-minute mark is like, when I quote myself, musical magic for me. Whatever is happening in that section of the piece is like, this is my bread and butter. Like, this is it. It's so cool. And the lyrics are great too. It's like, it seems like somebody's like, doing like a laborious job day in and day out, and like it's inspired by somebody else, eventually leaves his hammer and tells his boss to, keep the damn thing because I'm gone. I think it's great. It's, it's super great. I think, I don't want to go into too detail on the instrumental stuff because quite frankly, I cannot analyze it with any musical theory knowledge because I don't have any. But it is, I think, one of the strongest and most cohesive pieces they've done yet. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to unpack, in a good way.
And that's kind of the comment I made, that I said that it's like a journey piece. Like when the door opens, it opens on everything, or I think that's what that song's called. That's almost what this reminds me of is, and that's the thing with Jack of the Clock is like, when you talk about other bands, you might say, well, this section reminds me of this artist, or this section reminds me of this other artist. And then, but oftentimes with these guys, when I want to compare a Jack of the Clock song, I often compare it to other Jack of the Clock songs.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
Because again, it's a world all of its own, and I'm realizing as we're doing this review that it's nearly impossible to talk about this music in any way that gives it justice, because that exact section that you talked about, the 3 to 6 minute, I said 3 to 4 minute mark.
Yeah.
But I said at this moment, the tone changes dramatically into classic Jack of the Clock mode.
What is that? Yeah.
And what is that? Yeah. What exactly is that? So yeah, again, this is one of the strongest tracks, and it does kind of take me back to some of the epic pieces on the Repetitions 1 and 2 album. And the amazing thing is that this is another old piece. Damon told me in an email that this was written like way back when he was still at Mills College.
It's bonkers to me.
And it's just one of those that has been laying around and looking, finally found a place to live. So yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just saying it's amazing that he, was so young when he wrote that piece. It's such a musically sophisticated. Like it's crazy. Like a lot of this band, like, in a way for me is like really close to classical music.
Sure.
And like, like a composer writing like symphonies, but it's like symphonies of like, I don't know if it's progressive music or if it's rock music. It's its own thing, as we said. But, it's like creating music in a sophisticated way, like a symphony, but it's in a very accessible Americana-driven rock kind of format. And it's, it's beautiful. It's totally beautiful. It's amazing. Every time I put on a Jack of the Clock album, I'm like, wow, this exists in the world that we live in. It's amazing.
Yeah. And people will often compare them to Jethro Tull, and I get that because they do bring in like a lot of those medieval sounding instruments that you get with like Songs from the Wood.
For sure.
And I think also like those big dramatic changes like you're talking about, or like when I said we're in classic Jack of the Clock mode, I think that those big changes from like being acoustic to suddenly being very loud to being back down atmospheric, I think that more than anything is probably why people compare them to Jethro Tull.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's a purely Tull style, like bringing in the classical music and then the rock band dynamics. So this next track, this is Just What It Seems, which I guess now that I say it out loud seems very apt.
Yeah.
Because it's a very simple, again, unassuming piece that separates these longer ones. And I mentioned that Damon's voice on this, when he does the quivering effect, takes me back to Roger Chapman of the band Family. And I asked Damon if he knew Roger Chapman. He's like, once or twice, maybe he heard it. I don't know. I thought I had found like the key that unlocked Jack of the Clock, and you know, I just found another door. Like it just makes it makes it all that more fascinating to me. It's like, oh, I think I finally figured it out. What is the ingredient that runs through here? And I was completely off base.
Wow. Yeah, I noted that like this is some of his best singing on the album.
Yes,
and he's singing a lot because there's a lot of amazing singing that he's doing here. Yeah, like he's just really terrific on this one. I really like the slide guitar and the harmonica. Like it's just a great little song. It's great. It's like it also like it serves as a good reprieve also because it's not a long song. It's one of those like shorter songs, not like a interlude, but an actual song. But it works perfect here because you have the Duras Rhinoceros is, you know, full of amazing music and is, you know, heavy. And then following this, you know, which is How Are We Doing, is part 1 of 2 of a really large piece of music that also is really dense and sprawling. You know, it's a nice little reprieve between those two things. And it's good sequencing.
It is, yeah. It allows the listener time to catch their breath and just kind of ruminate on what they've heard before. Yeah, here we go. There's another one. And this piece, How Are We Doing? This is another one that was written, like originally conceived while Damon was still a student, and as an experimental composition while studying at Mills. So with that in mind, let's break into this one. What do we have to say?
So it starts off with some really great controlled, like instrumental madness. It's very much like a, you know, it's a Jack of the Clock spin on like maybe like a Universeo improvisation or like a Henry Cow improvisation. Like it's like a lot of like, it's almost like it's an angular, tense, like all the instruments are like putting their dukes up and fighting kind of section. It's great. And I, you know, when the singing starts, you get a really nice musical accompaniment with that also. And like, I described in my notes, like a lot of the instrumentals are kind of like the hustle and bustle of cars, or like I pictured like a busy office environment, like, you know, Gregory Peccary running around with the calendar and the Zappa piece. Like I picture stuff like that. You know, my only other note on this piece is like this one probably took the longest for me to really appreciate, but it is very awesome. It's just this is probably the most statistically dense piece of music on the album.
Well,
you know,
it's about, from what I understand, it's about the anxieties of modern life.
Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense.
And so that works the way that you described it. Like, you know, he said there's a lot of like climate anxiety in this, and like, you know, the emergence of artificial intelligence, like that. And it's funny that those themes are in there, but he wrote this over 15 years ago. You know, that's again, nuts. Like it makes it even more feel like a piece because it feels right for right now to be writing about these things. So
100%.
My comment was that this took me back to like late 90s King Crimson, like the construction of light.
Yeah, you're right, man.
Era. With that Henry Cow kind of frosting on top of it, sprinkled like on top.
Some of the more crazier double trio improvs.
Yeah.
Like that, like they would stretch sometimes into like this weird avenues.
Yeah, that's kind of what this reminds me of. And I'm trying to think of the exact piece. In fact, it might even be on Power to Believe that kind of has a similar heavy sound to this, the way that this opens. But and I made a joke because Damon compared one of our tracks on the Coloratura album to Thinking Plague, which is
really
cool.
That's really cool.
So I said it's my turn because this weird accompaniment that comes in and you think, what the heck? Where is this going? This is not like anything I've ever, like, how do I even relate what I'm hearing? And what does he do? He starts singing. And it becomes like the verse. It becomes the verse of the song. Like, this is home base of the song. And that moment, that was like, to me, that reminded me a little bit of Thinking Plague and some of the more out there things that they've done. But and I even said, like, this is an inspired choice, and this track within the context of this album is like a journey within the journey. It's like a dream within the dream.
Yeah, totally. Oh wow, I need to go back and hear this again. Oh crap, that's dope.
And then I said this is like a movie for your head, and the ending of this kind of takes me back to the song "Old Friend in a Hole," where he's whispering through the electrical socket or whatever, the spirit. Right. He's almost got that same vibe to the ending of this, and this piece is magic to me. I would almost say this is my other favorite song on the album, except that the one that follows it I think is even better.
I agree. I think and Who Will Tell Us, the second part, is even better, and it's co-written with Jordan. I'm sorry, Jason Hoops, the bass player.
Damon said that he and Jason wrote this in the context of like a structured improvisation, and that's where that first beginning, like the very beginning, the acoustic stuff, those two wrote that together in like a structured improvisation. But what I love about this song is that this, of all the songs on the album, reminds me the most of Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, in that it uses acoustic instruments, but it's very aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
If this song had been played on electric instruments, it might sound like a Sleepy Time song.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's, it's got a lot of edge, but it's just this gorgeous acoustic instruments instead.
Right. Yeah. And
who thinks to do that? It's so cool.
His arrangement of the acoustic and the way that they're layered and the way that the harmonies kind of poke in and out of the texture, I think is really, really just brilliant writing.
It is brilliant.
And kind of like at the 2/3 side, I said I hate to break it to Damon, because Damon has said publicly he's not a fan of Martin Barr, the guitarist for Jethro Tull.
That's kind of surprising.
And yeah, it was to me as well. And so I thought that I would add this caveat. I hate to break it to Damon, but in about 3.5 minutes, he kind of reminds me of Martin Barr.
That's hilarious.
The way he comes in with those muscular guitar tones. And I even said something like, for my money, this is the only track that is anyway Tullish to me. Like, this is the only one that kind of evokes Jethro Tull, but still it goes in unexpected directions, and it still remains coherent, because they always, Damon and Jack of the Clock, they always know how to bring it back to home base through the folk music, through those little short little snippets. Like, those are you waking up in your bed and knowing, and then you were there, and then you were there, and then you were there. It's like the Wizard of Oz, and then you can go and have these like magical adventures with the Tin Man and Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion. That's kind of how I would describe, why this album and Jack of the Clock's music in general is so successful to me. Is because it never goes too far out there. It always kind of comes back to that acoustic guitar sound and the vocals and the hammered dulcimer. Like, I really like.
It's a root of the music,
Yeah, I like having that home base, that root, as you say. So do you have anything else to add about this piece?
No. I pretty much wrote almost everything. I also wrote, "Damn, the band is tight," in my notes also. They're killing it. Yeah, I like the second part better also. I don't know, it's something about it. It's like that aggressiveness on the acoustic instruments. It just has like an urgency more than, the other one is frantic and frenetic, which, now that we've talked about it, makes a lot of sense. But it has that like home base coming back to home quality at the end. I really, really enjoy that. It's terrific. Yeah. And then it segues into the final piece called Snowman on a Ledge, which is I think a really nice pensive closer. I actually like that tune. Probably this might be the one that didn't click until my last listen to the album, and I had it on my stereo, and just it starts out with just Damon on the hammered dulcimer alone, and it is so pretty. He plays this really restrained solo, and then Thea Kelly's voice sings these short little lyrics. It's really nice. It's a great way to close the album. Yeah. Kind of like it's a quiet send off. It like the title Snowman on a Ledge is very much winter evocative, right? And like I think the music is a very good accompaniment for like, you ever look out at snow at night? Like that's, what I was picturing listening to that the last time. And it clicked. It was like, wow, this is gorgeous.
I would admit that this is the one song in the album that hasn't quite clicked for me yet. I don't know if I need just more times to gel, to gel with it. But as I made, the comment I made earlier sort of stands that I'm sure that there were 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 pieces that Damon could have chosen from his repertoire to end this album on. But I'm sure he chose this one because it was the right coda for the mood that he wanted to set. And, even though I don't relate to this one quite yet, I don't quite, it hasn't gelled with me yet. I know that he chose this because it was what he wanted. It was the right thing for this album. So, again, like I have to compliment his discipline, his restraint, his ability to self-edit, because that's not always a skill that everyone has. You can have these albums that just go on and ramble forever and, don't seem to have any kind of home base or doesn't seem to come back into anything that resembles reality. But I think that Damon is very smart to make these choices to end on these like really just, atmospheric. It's very similar to the way that the Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum album ends. It's just very sort of sweet and just kind of makes you think about what you heard.
Yeah, it absolutely is. The lyrics actually are kind of amazing for this song. I didn't really realize it until looking at them again. Also, they're just 2 verses, but it says so much. So these are the lyrics. Snowman on a Ledge by Damon Wacus. 20 stories in the air, Broadway far below. A figure is standing, his head full of snow. Rainy weather hit him hard, tightened up his belt. But I don't think he'll do it. More likely, he'll melt.
Wow.
So, yeah, initially reading the lyrics like, oh, he'll melt. He's a snowman. But it's like there's some guy standing on Broadway and he's covered in snow. But it's starting to rain. Maybe he's going to, he's mustering up the courage to jump off a building. But he most likely won't do it. It's, a really sad and pivotal moment for someone's life.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think of it until you mentioned it, so I'll have to kind of keep that in mind.
I like when you were talking, I just glanced at the lyrics and I was like, oh, wait a second, there's something really nuts going on here in a good way.
Yeah.
That's poetry, baby,
All right, so the Mike Lieto poetry recital will be held next Thursday night.
I do love poetry, so hey, join us as we have treats and we recite some poetry from the 1950s or something. I don't know.
And then we're gonna snap our fingers. It's gonna be great.
Don't miss it.
All right, so do we have any closing comments about Jack of the Clock, the Warm Dark Circus?
Well, if we haven't gushed enough, this album's incredible. If you haven't heard this, go hear it, go buy it, support this band. They are a small band. They could use support, I'm sure. I think this is a 10 out of 10. This is one of their best albums, in my opinion. And I think actually it is my favorite album from last year, from 2023. Wow. This is the number one pick.
Wow.
It was the King Gizzard album, Petrotectonic Apocalypse, but I think this nudges it out slightly.
I guess my closing thought is, so with the Sleepy Time review, we said that of natural history, that was the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Of Sleepy Time guerrilla music. That is the one that all other Sleepy Time records must be compared to. What do you think is that album for Jack of the Clock? Is there a best album?
That's a really hard question. I think my favorite album is Repetitions 1. And maybe I could talk myself into making an argument about that being the album to end all albums for Jack of the Clock. But they have such a strong and consistent discography, and every single album has tons of musical information that you can explore. Every time you visit an album, even if you know it back to front, you'll still find something new to discover and explore. And that's every single one of their albums. It's not just one album is the one of natural history. It's all of them, really. There isn't a sour note in the bunch. Some of them may have a personal preference more than other ones, but that's just because either familiarity or you just like the songs more. There's a treasure trove of music on all these albums. I don't know if you can pick one.
Familiarity is a big thing for me as well. And I have their first album and I haven't heard it yet. So there's even a record of theirs that I don't know
the first one either, actually.
But I've always been I came into All My Friends, which I played in kind of preparation for this review, and it still holds up. It's a wonderful record.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one in a long time, but that was the first one for me also.
It still holds up. And Night Loops, it's a little spooky. It's kind of I think we said it was like Henry Cowell's Western Culture meets Peter Gabriel 3 and 4.
It's so great. Yeah.
It's a really, really, really great record. So that's one that I find really strong, but I have this, I guess because we saw them between Night Loops and Repetitions 1, and we got a lot of the material from Repetitions 1 at Prog Day, that tends to be my favorite. It's like a sentimental favorite. It's a familiarity thing, as you said.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's nothing that is saying wow, this is so much better than that, or that one's so much better than this one. To me, they're equal quality. Like you said, and kind of like I had said earlier, Jack of the Clock is one note. It's kind of one big piece. And even Damon said in a message that there's a lot of these pieces like How Are We Doing and a couple of pieces on Night Loops that were part of a 30-minute epic that is still unreleased and has some pieces that haven't even come out yet. So it's kind of hard to judge. This is the best Jack. This is the one that's kind of like the big one. So all I have to say is keep it up. Keep up the great work. This is another great record by this band, and I'm just as likely to put this one on to show somebody their music as Repetitions Part 1. So
me too, actually. Yeah.
So are we gonna say it? Do we recommend the Warm Dark Circus?
100%. Go and get the Warm Dark Circus by Jack of the Clock.
Buy it.
This is an amazing.
Yesterday. Buy it yesterday.
You should have bought it already. What are you doing?
All right. Well, any closing thoughts, Mike?
No, we hope you had fun. I know I did. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know how we are doing. Let us know what you think about this.
Let us know how we are doing and who will tell us.
And you will be the ones who tell us. Exactly. So please let us know, and please let us know what you think of this also, because this is
go check it out.
Diggity, we think. We hope you do too.
All right. It's been fun, Mike, and we'll talk real soon. Bye-bye, my friend.
Bye-bye, friend.